Welcome back, Terry. You have more stories to share with us today.
Yeah, so you want me to just kick right in? And
go ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd come down and tell you about what it was like growing up in Burlington. I'd go back, excuse me, my family I was thinking of, maybe I'd give a little background also, not very long. The Abrishes and the Getz came over from Germany about 1849, 1850. And like a lot of, German immigrants, they ended up, gravitating over toward, Osborne Street and just up the hill there to the kind of to the west edge of North Hill and everything. What was there? The Getz family were basically the people who started what is now the Irish pub, which would be an abomination to her because they were good Germans. And so, they had that tavern in the 1880s, 1890s, on up till Prohibition in 1915 hit Iowa. We had Prohibition here in Iowa 5 years before National Prohibition came in, or so. And anyway, so Great Grandma Getz had the tavern there. Her, what was there? Uncle Johnny took over for it. That would have been my grandmother's brother. And then, okay, they ran that, and we were just a bunch of North Hill people, like I said, we came over here 1849, 1850. In about 1945, my grandfather had some health issues, and this is kind of unusual, I think, that they left for California, Grandpa, Grandma, and my dad. And so usually when people leave for California, they don't come back. And anyway, when Dad was home on leave, living out in Monterey and Santa Cruz in California, he saw this pretty little young lady at the roller rink, and well, asked her out. Within a year, they're married. Within a little over a year, less than a year, they had the first of us 6 kids. They had my brother Richard, and then he was going to lose his job on the Fort Ord Fire Department. Because President Eisenhower was putting all those jobs back into the military, and Dad was not, and Mom was not letting Dad join the military to travel all over. She wanted, Mom had grown up in a different family that was basically, her father would take them all over the country to pick crops. I mean, I'm talking cherries in Michigan, next thing you know, cotton down in the South, oranges in California. Mom's family was basically migrant farm workers, and she wanted a permanent place to live. And so they got married. He lost his job at the Fort Ord Fire Department when, like I said, Eisenhower puts it under the military control. And so they end up moving back here in like December of 1953. And it wasn't too long after that, I think maybe a year or two, Grandma and Grandpa came back here. And so anyway, they first lived with my Aunt Mary and Uncle Willie up on Oak Street, not too far from where he'd grown up as a kid on Osborne Street Hill, 1300 Osborne, or no, 1301. And anyway, so they get there, and they ended up moving out to the manor shortly after that. And I remember Dad telling me one time that, they were really upset because they thought they'd never get out of the manor if they moved to the manor. And so they were there, that they were all living on Columbia Street. And the interesting thing is I can't take you or anybody and show you the 3 places that they lived out in the manor. They've all been bulldozed, and now they're covered up by furniture stores and Walgreens and what was there? They're in back of like Connection Bank and that, and back of Sonic and that. I can't show you any of the places I lived until I was 10 years old. And the same thing goes for my school. Flint Hill School has been gone for probably most of the last 8 or 9 years. What was there? The manor was interesting. Like I said, it seems to be one of those places that people slam a lot. Personally, I didn't have a problem living there. I thought it was it's what I knew. We lived in in the first 2 months after I was born, we had a tiny little place on Ordnance Court. Don't you just love these streets that I can't take you to, or did you even know where it was? Just curious. Anyway,
I've heard of them.
Yeah, Ordnance Court, Union Court, there was a little place called Grimes Court. All gone, they're not on the maps anymore. I mean, like I said, they're probably gonna be forgotten here in another 20 years when people like me shuffle off this mortal coil. And anyway, so we had to move to a bigger place because Mom and Dad and the 4 kids were no longer fitting. The kids were also getting bigger, the older ones. And so when I came along, we moved down to this, 2-story townhouse, if you could call it that. That was probably about 30 feet wide and about 50 feet deep, I think. And so you have, 3 bedrooms upstairs, bedroom for Mom and Dad, and 2 little tiny bedrooms for us kids. I mean, you had to have bunk beds to fit everybody in there and that. So the one thing I did love about it, though, we had a huge backyard. We also had a little front yard there where we'd play in. I remember that we made after the big snow of January of '67, my brothers and sisters piled all the snow they could up and made a tiny little sledding hill and everything. And about that time, I remember coming home from kindergarten. And coming home from kindergarten right before Christmas, I walk in, Nat King Cole's A Christmas Story is playing on the radio. Mom had hot cocoa waiting for me. Wonderful memory. So, yeah. And then you had, what was summertime, springtime, a small little apartment like that. To keep Mom sane, she sent us outside to play. And while she was trying to do, laundry, make clothes and everything. So we had our big backyard. We had a huge backyard back there, which I was so thankful for. We had our little baseball field or wiffle ball field which ran, north to south and everything. Anything hit into the Olsons and the Massacs garden, that was a home run. Football time, then you ran it east and west and everything. The clotheslines where Mom would hang their clothes. This is going to explain a lot to you probably about me. When we were 6 years old, Joe and I were watching TV one Saturday, and here's this game called soccer we'd never heard of. And so we had to try to play soccer. Joe's goal was probably was our swing set. Mine, the goal he had to kick the ball between was about 5 feet wide with 2 cast iron clothes posts. So we're running back and forth, kicking, and he kicks a shot on goal, and I was going to be like the goalkeeper on TV I'd seen, and I was going to make a diving save. Problem was, this arm goes on this side of the cast iron clothes post. This arm goes on this side of the cast iron clothes post, and the cast iron clothes post goes dead center perfect here. I go down in a heap, struggle to my feet. Joe's trying to look at me and see how I'm doing, and he's follows me over as I make my way to the back porch. I wasn't crying too loud because I knew it wasn't doing me good. It wasn't until I got to the back porch that's when I started crying, because I knew then Mom could hear me. As I'm crying, Joe will tell you this day, there is this lump shooting out of my head and everything. And my brother, who was 9, with his usual, typical 9-year-old medical technology and expertise, sees this thing coming out of my forehead and tries to shove it back in. So, yeah, I always tell people that's why the brain probably goes the way it does, hitting that clothes post so hard. And so we were doing that, and what was there? It was great. I mean, being a rebellious, little stubborn sort as we were, our bedroom faced south, and south of us 2 blocks was Hy-Vee number 2, the one that's now over on Agency. That was its first location, was at 120 South Roosevelt, the same address as Burger King is now. And being a bit of a rebel, I was supposed to go to bed at 8:30. Well, I wouldn't lay down and actually try to go to sleep until after 9. The Hy-Vee had this, vertical sign, Hy-Vee, and it wasn't until they shut off that sign then I'd lay down. And they closed at 9, So I'd sit there and I'd watch that sign, and when that sign went dark, okay, it's time to go lay down. Unless the Cardinals were playing on the West Coast. Then I'd stay there and I'd try to wait, listen to Jack Buck, Harry Carey, and then later on Jack Buck and whoever we had, Bill Starr, Bob Starr, whatever, and listen to the Cardinals till late at night and everything on the radio. Scratchy old brown Arvin radio and that. Like I said, living in the manor, we rode a lot of bus. I talked about that earlier in the other talk I gave a couple weeks ago, where riding the bus downtown was our escape and everything. Come down here to the library, get your 6 library books. You know, if you got a real heavy one, then you might have to settle for 5 for 2 weeks and that. And so, like I said, you rode the bus and that. And like I said, walked to Flint Hill School and that. When we were 10, Mom and Dad, thanks largely to Mom's squeezing every penny she could, she made a lot of clothes for us. She also made the 2 greatest Halloween costumes I think I've ever seen. I'm wearing this today basically to honor her memory, because when I was 7, I think it was either 6 or 7, she made me a Snoopy costume. Way ahead of anything you'd see in a store. She made me a Snoopy costume. And the only thing that topped that was she made the cutest little tiger costume for my sister Cindy. My little sister had the most beautiful little tiger costume. So then, when we were 10, it was time for us to move to West Avenue in Leabrick. Mom and Dad put the money together. He has a GI Bill and everything. He was getting his pension from his heart attack at the fire department. So anyway, we moved over to West Avenue in Leabrick, the southwest corner, a beautiful little brick 1.5-story house and everything. And I drive it to this day. I call it Casa Esther. So, don't care who lives there, don't care who lives there, how long, it's always going to be Casa Esther. She made it at home. And anyway, but it was different getting over there. What was there? We started doing a little better. Mom and Dad were doing a little better financially. First year I was there, I had to go 2 blocks for the 1 block to course school, because the crosswalk was down at, crossing light was down at Star Avenue. So I went to West Ave, or there, we'd walk down there, Cindy and I would. She was starting 2nd grade when I was in 5th. The other big thing though that happened that first summer in '71 was we also started getting an allowance. And being good, okay, uber baseball fan that I am, I got 50 cents allowance. I found out that if I had 52 cents, I could walk down to the corner store there that was still there at that time, at Star, and give me 5 packs of baseball cards and everything. That was my weekly highlight, was, go down there, get my 5 packs, open them up. Why there always seemed to be a Milwaukee Brewer in every pack, I have no idea. If I got a Cardinal, it was probably like Bob Berta or Mil Ramirez. Nobody had ever made it big. So we lived there, and then after 1 year, it was to walk over to Horace Mann and everything, walk the 2 or 3 blocks that way and that. And it was, it was a beautiful neighborhood and everything. Wintertime, let's go sledding at Perkins Park. Oh my God, the sledding there was just phenomenal and everything. To walk up that, I remember how, you write it down, you come right back up, you write it down, you come back up, you write it down, you come back up, ride those saucer sleds down there. Now I think one trip up back up the hill would probably do me in. and that. So anyway, got there through there, then there was Apollo for 9th grade and everything, and what was that? And then next thing you know, before you know it, it's time to go to BHS and everything. Sophomore BHS. And the thing about Apollo I got to go back to. What I loved about how we had Apollo back then was all your 4 middle schools at that time would converge for 9th grade. It was really a nice thing to have your class get to know each other before you got lost in the swirl of the high school. And even then you still didn't get to know everybody and everything. But it was a nice 1 year over there and everything. It was also nice and close to downtown. Wrestling with my friends and everything there. What was there? Scalding each other, what was there? over at Apollo, we wrestled in what was the girls' gym and used their locker room to have to get ready for practice and that. And it was very old school technology, because if you flushed a john, then you'd scald the guy in the shower. You waited for the guy you hated the most generally to go in there. I don't know if we want to keep that or not, but that's up to you. And anyway, so then on to BHS and everything, and I'm still suffering, as I told the last time. I'm still suffering from being, Richard's brother, Joe's brother, Sue's brother, Kathy's brother, and that. And what was there? It wasn't so bad, I mean, there were a lot of the teachers at Horace Mann had left and everything else. There might have been a few that had my other brothers and sisters. But I remember like 6th grade, I had a brand new science teacher, Joe Desi, and so he didn't know me from Adam. It's like, thank God I got a chance with this guy, Then I had a great test score in 7th grade. They gave us like an IQ test, and and I was like, the counselor's all of a sudden like, well, you should be doing a lot better. You need to apply yourself more and everything else. Like, oh God, this again. I've been hearing this crap already for years. I'm really sick and tired of it. Carried it over, what was there, and it carries over to the high school. I mean, to show you how bad it was when I was a senior, I had a counselor. I just wanted to take a little simple bookkeeping course. And this counselor took one look and said, no, you belong in accounting. And I'm like, I don't want to take accounting. I want to take bookkeeping, for God's sake. I'm not going to become a CPA or anything. I have no desire to. And that, like I said, so high school, another thing that happened was when I was at the end of my sophomore year, I started working at Hy-Vee, making a whopping $2.80 an hour. Okay, doesn't sound like much. At the time, minimum wage nationally was $2.30. So I was making $2.80 an hour, and I can still tell you, the first paycheck I got, it was like for 8 hours and something, I think, and $24.02 gross with a take home of $22.47. I mean, don't ask me how I'm remembering that 48 years later, but I do. First paycheck. I mean, hell, I was just, excited I was going to go buy General Motors or something. And that then the next paycheck was like for 36.8 hours, $96. Oh, I was set for life, I thought, I remember. And like I said, but the thing was, high school was funny because, yes, I was very quick, very smart, made the high school bowl team. Have you ever seen the old GE College Bowl?
No.
Okay. There used to be a thing on NBC called the GE College Bowl where they'd have 2 teams of 4 students from various colleges have a playoff to see which school. It was just general knowledge quiz and everything and that. So, and you'd buzz in, you'd have toss-up questions and bonus questions. Well, my brother Joe was on the first team at BHS when they first started the show in 74, 75. Neither one of us was in school. And then, so when I was a sophomore, my friend Gerard Gates and we found a couple other guys, and we decided we were going to try out for the high school bowl team. And they thought, okay, bunch of sophomores, okay, we'll put them up against the best and the brightest of the seniors of the class of 77. We'll be done with them. So they started asking us these toss-up questions, and boom, I get the first one. We get a bonus question, get points out of it. Boom, Gerard gets the second toss-up question. Boom, I get the third. Next thing you know, we're trouncing the best and the brightest of the class of 77 by about 150 points and everything. So Gerard and I were on the team. We were the first sophomores to make the team. We did it all 3 years. By the time I was a senior, our senior year, we came within one toss-up question of winning the whole 32-team tournament. We lost to Galesburg in the finals, just because I froze for a millisecond, and the kid from Galesburg who got all their questions just nudged me out. To this day, I can't think of New Mexico without cringing, So, anyway, but the thing was, I wasn't ready for college. I was just telling a friend about it, today, how I took my ACTs when I was a senior in December, like December 3rd, took the ACT and got a 27 on it. And by the way, I was hungover. 27. So I wonder what I could have done sober. Probably at 26. So anyway, then I get the form letter from Iowa a few weeks later, because that's where I submitted one of them to, was Iowa, Western Illinois, and SEC. And Iowa sends me the letter saying, well, based on the fact your test score and your in-state residency, we can guarantee you a place in our freshman class. And it's like, I'm even sitting there reading it like, are you guys serious? You guys just want the money that I'll be throwing away by going now and everything. So it's like, no. I enjoyed working at Hy-Vee. Hy-Vee was a great place to work. What I love about it now, looking back, was it was a very good leveler. You met everybody. You had to deal, you had to be nice and show the banker's wife, who nobody else wanted to deal with. I was the guy she'd come find to show her where the toothpicks were. I would also do that for the poorest soul that walked in. I'd be just as nice to them as I was to Mrs. Walsh and everything. You tried to be nice to everybody. You worked with kids from all over the different schools and everything. It was just a lot of fun. It was a great job that I'm really fortunate to have had. I ran my butt off. Like I said, my boss told me to introduce me to people. This is the hardest work we ever had here, the best work we ever had here, and that. But got to drinking a little too much, and it cost me a career with the company. So all of a sudden, I decided, well, I'm going to go try a couple years at Southeastern, and then I'll think about maybe going on after that. And so summer of '83, my first class, this is probably going to shock you, my first class was Introduction to American Poetry and Drama, which I aced. Of course, I'd acted in high school a lot. If you've ever seen or heard the Arthur Miller play, All My Sons, we got, my buddy John Shootman and I got the raving reviews from the Hawkeye and everything. I'm playing a guy 3 times my age and everything, but I was smart enough, I patterned how I played the guy after my dad and that. So anyway, '83, I started Southeastern, and about 2 or 3 months in, my drinking was affecting my studies, so I just quit cold turkey. And been there 42 years now, almost 41, 42 years. So yeah, and it was fun. Had a great couple of mentors out there. Jack Anderson, who taught me American history and American politics and government, and Nancy Nafee, who taught me World Civ. Jack was a Boston born and bred guy who, that New England accent, that Boston accent was still thicker than anything. He parked the car and everything. And that he joined the Navy when the day after Pearl Harbor when he was 13, lied about his age and everything. To celebrate VJ Day, he said that he was back home in Boston and they borrowed a Boston fire truck and that. And Nancy Nafee, I had her for World Civ. They were just 2 of the best teachers I ever had. And what was there? The funniest story I can tell you about Nancy Nafee and I. We were talking about, she was lecturing on the French Revolution, and she was there, and she starts talking about La Marseillaise, the French national anthem, and she's like, okay, how many of you here have seen Casablanca? It was just the 2 of us. We were the only 2 that had ever seen Casablanca. And so we briefly thought about it, but I was leaving at the end of the semester. I was going to graduate. And we thought about trying to start a classic film festival out there. And that's why, like, here at Valentine's Day, jump ahead, 40, some years, it was big this year that, it was my suggestion that we show Casablanca on Valentine's Day weekend down here at the Capitol. Just because, I thought, okay, if there's anybody out there, maybe some kids will see Casablanca or something. There were a few kids in the crowd and everything, younger people and that. And I thought, well, this is a nice little tribute to Nancy too. So, let's see. Oh, trying to think of anything else to tell you about here. But anyway, Jack, I got to get back to Jack Anderson. He told me when I was just in my last weeks at Hy-Vee, back in like August, September of 1988. I was driving back and forth on the weekends. And Jack took me aside one night and says, Terry, if you don't do anything with this degree, that history degree you're gonna get, I'm gonna kick your ass. Jack unfortunately died that winter of a heart attack and everything. But I didn't go into teaching, and all I was doing was, I should point out that when I was quitting drinking, the library at 4th and Columbia was one of my favorite hangouts. I would go up and everything on the old microfilm machines, those big old silver ones they had back then. And that was one of the things that kept me, kept me going. And that it also gave me a little chance to talk to Dad and ask Dad, since Dad grew up here, I could ask him about stories of, what happened and this and that and everything. I'd go look up a fire and he'd tell me, oh yeah, the ladder truck about went down the hill into the river or something. And it was just, but anyway, Jack was there, and I remember, him telling me, you do some of that history degree, I'm gonna kick your ass. And it took me until I got back here in 2014 when I got asked to do paper and a pot of coffee. It's like, hey Jack, you finally doing it right and everything, and moving it down here. Like I said, and some of the topics have been fun and that. I think he would really appreciate some of the stuff. He likes social history, so he would like when I talked about the movies in Burlington and everything else. I'm getting ahead of myself now. Like I said, I was 27. My last day at Hy-Vee, October 9, 1988. Yeah, it's burned in my memory. The only thing was that day I had planned was the two things you got asked for the most when you worked in a grocery store, Stephanie, were where's your bathrooms and where are the toothpicks? I swear to God, those are the two things I got asked for the most in 11 and a half years. And what was there? So the last day I was there, I was all set. Because the first person that I'd moved to Iowa City, I'd been living there about 2 months now, going to classes and everything, driving back on the weekends. I was just dying for the first person to come up to me and ask me my last day there, excuse me, sir, where's your bathroom? At the top of the stairs of my apartment in Iowa City. Why? The only person that asked me was a sweet little 6-7-year-old girl, and it's like, I can't do that to a kid. I will not do that to a kid. So, like I said, went home, signed the sheet saying I was done. Kept my money in the trust fund. The Hy-Vee trust fund is what kept me there all those years. So, until I was fully vested. When I was fully vested, I had like $9,000 sitting there. I had enough cash saved up. I kept my hands off that trust fund money and left it in the trust fund for a year, made $2,000 more. And that way, when I left, when I graduated from Iowa, all I was paying on was one $1,000 loan from Hills Bank. So, but yeah, like I said, and then I stayed close to the area, but Burlington wasn't home for another 26 years. So, anything you want to know more about or ask about?
What specifically about Burlington made it home and made you want to come back after being away for so long?
Mom, number one. Mom, biggest thing. She needed me. My brother had passed away a few months before. Cindy was doing all she could. My sister Kathy was helping out a little. But Mom, she needed me. So I left Schwann's, quit them after 22 years and came back home. Got me a job. But this place was always home. It was home. And the ties here were that strong, and that I loved this town. Obviously I love this town from just all the studying and everything. When I was at Iowa, my first semester at Iowa, I had to do an oral history project for my history of Iowa since 1900 course. And the professor wanted something before 1960. I went to him and said, hey, could you give me a year's leeway? And he said, what are you going to talk about? I said, the Burlington police scandal. And so I came down here and I talked to TK Ford for an hour. Plus I already had all the newspapers and everything, talking about how our third shift cops were, looting stores for whatever they needed. You know, if they needed paint, they'd go break into Woody's Paint Factory. If they needed shoes, they'd break into Brown Shoe Fit. The best were the guys who would break into beer trucks and steal their beer. Guys who went right across the street from the police station on Valley, who broke in and stole stuff for their car. But when they broke in, there was Lucking Tire and Battery is the place. It was where the F&M Drive-In is down at 4th and Valley. These guys broke into broke into Lucking Tire and Battery, called over to the station and says, "Hey, we're at Lucking's over here if you need us for a call." So in other words, if you need somebody to go investigate a burglary, interrupt ours and everything. But like I said, I love the history of this town. Dad had been on the fire department 14 years before his heart attack. Mom came here, and like I said, this became her home, the home she never had as a kid. So, and it's always been home. It'll always be home. I mean, I'm still looking at newspapers for programs and everything. By the way, you'll be getting a batch of stuff from the 1940s probably on Monday.
All right.
An email and that. But I mean, I just love going through. Like I said, what was there? For me, Burlington, I'll close with this basically. It's kind of like Burt Lancaster tells Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams in his doctor's office. You know, there's like, you know, when you find a place like this, the wind doesn't blow cold enough. You know, you're here, you're home, and everything. This is it. Like I said, I don't complain. You know, if the apartment's a little drafty, I don't complain. This place is my home, and it's had its draw, and it's, you know, I plan on shuffling off this mortal coil here sometime. You know, like I said, hopefully it won't be from the cat, you know, sleeping on me or something. So.
Gwynny would never.
Yeah, I hope not. So, anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing all of those.
Anyway, whew.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie.